hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin. Check. You already know. Let's go. Welcome to the college football YouTube channel known as Golden Blue. Please hit the like and subscribe button if that's what you're into. And everybody, send gear to represent your team in my background forever. Check it out. That's all my background is made of. Send your gear to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29650. Time to talk about the really bad teams again. I haven't done this in a while. I think it was because West Virginia showed me a glimmer of hope by beating Baylor, and I kind of just forgot about it. I shouldn't do that from now. Even if West Virginia somehow does win another game, I need to keep this going no matter what. But anyways, we're back to talking about the worst Power 5 teams in all of college football. And some of this list has pretty much remained the same, but a lot of things have changed as well. Some teams have bounced in and some teams have bounced out. First up, we'll start with the dishonorable mentions. And by the way, all these rankings are based on record, offensive, and defensive stats, and a little bit of Golden Blue Dude's opinion. All right, the dishonorable mention list. First, Texas A&M, they're 3-4, averaging 21 points per game. That's 109th, allowing 20.4 points per game, which is 25th. Their only wins against FCSM, Houston State, Miami, who was number 13 at the time, and Arkansas, who was number 10 at the time. Those are not ranked wins anymore. Anyways, Texas A&M, you suck, but you don't suck quite enough to be on my list, or at least be ranked on my list. Next, this honorable mention is going to be Iowa. They're 3-4, averaging 14 points per game. Terrible offense, 128th, allowing 16.1 points per game, which is 8th. So you have a good defense. Wins over FCS, South Dakota State, Nevada, and at Rutgers. Iowa, you also suck as well, just not quite enough to get ranked in my worst teams. Another dishonorable mention is going to be Iowa State. They're also 3-4, averaging 22.9 points per game, 103rd. Terrible offense as well, allowing 15.1 points per game, which is 6th. So both Iowa teams have a terrible offense, but a great defense. So you both suck, but Iowa State, you didn't manage to get ranked in my worst teams list this week. Next dishonorable mention is going to be the Canes of Miami. They're also 3-4, averaging 29.3 points per game, which is 67th, and allowing 24 points per game, which is 53rd. Not great on offense or defense, but not bad enough to actually get ranked. So you get a dishonorable mention. Last dishonorable mention, and I say this begrudgingly because I was looking for every excuse in the book to get them ranked, and I'm talking about my team, West Virginia. So no, I am not playing favorites. There are teams that are worse than West Virginia. 15 to be exact. But West Virginia is also 3-4, averaging 34.9 points per game, which is 31st. That's basically what kept them out of the rankings. But they allow 33.7 points per game, which is 119th. So you definitely get a dishonorable mention, and let's fire Neil Brown before we end up in the top 5 on Golden Blue Dude's worst teams of the week. I was actually in the middle of editing this video, and I figured out that I was missing one team on the dishonorable mentions list, which is why I'm wearing a different outfit. This is a post-edit production because this team is bad enough to where they need to be dishonorably mentioned. Michigan State, they're 3-4, averaging 27 points per game, which is 79th, allowing 27.1 points per game, which is 74th. Wins include Western Michigan, Akron, and Wisconsin. Losses at Washington, Minnesota, at Maryland, and number 3, Ohio State. Remaining schedule at number 4, Michigan, at number 17, Illinois, Rutgers, Indiana, and at number 13, Penn State. I warned Michigan State fans that you were in for a major step back this year, and that's exactly what's happened. You've been on and off my actual rankings, but for this week, you're only on the dishonorable mentions list. Still not great though. All right, now on to my actual rankings. The worst 15 teams in the entire nation in the Power 5 conferences. Starting at number 15, Auburn. An SEC team kicks this list off. They're 3-4, averaging 22.3 points per game, which is 108th, and allowing 28.3 points per game, which is 83rd. So they suck both on offense and defense. Wins over FCS, Mercer, San Jose State, and Missouri. Losses to number 22, Penn State, LSU, at number 2, Georgia, and at number 9, Ole Miss. Remaining schedule, Arkansas, at Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Western Kentucky, and at number 6, Alabama. So they do have a couple of opportunities to grab a win, but they're bad enough to where they might not grab those opportunities. Auburn can finish 3-9. Number 14, Missouri, 3-4, averaging 24 points per game, which is 98th, and allowing 23.1 points per game, which is 50th. And the only reason they were one spot above Auburn was, well, they lost to Auburn. Wins include Louisiana Tech, FCS, Abilene Christian, and Vanderbilt. Losses include at Kansas State, at Auburn, number 1, Georgia, and at Florida. Remaining schedule at number 25, South Carolina, number 19, Kentucky, at number 3, 3, Tennessee, New Mexico State, and Arkansas. So maybe at least there's one more win on that schedule, and that's New Mexico State. Number 13 on this list is Stanford. They used to be much higher on this list. They're also 3-4, averaging 25.1 points per game, which is 92nd, and allowing 27.4 points per game, which is 76th. They are a terrible, terrible team. Their wins include FCS Colgate at Notre Dame somehow, some way. Also a win against a bad Arizona State. Losses include number 10 USC, at number 18 Washington, at number 13 Oregon, and Oregon State. Remaining schedule at number 12 UCLA, Washington State, at number 14 Utah, at Cal, and BYU. I do think Stanford can pick up a couple more wins, but they're still a bad team. Number 12 on this list, Virginia, and there are several ACC schools on this list. Virginia kicks it off. They're 3-4, averaging 17.6 points per game, which is 123rd. Terrible offense, allowing 22.6 points per game, which is 44th. So let me get this straight. One of the best offensive coordinators that Clemson has had in a while, and Tony Elliott, gets the job at Virginia. They're great on defense, and they suck on offense. Go figure. Wins include FCS Richmond, Old Dominion, at Georgia Tech. Losses at Illinois, at Syracuse, at Duke, Louisville. Remaining schedule, Miami Hurricanes, number 21 North Carolina, Pitt, Coastal Carolina, and Virginia Tech. If they can't get a couple of wins out of that, then they will skyrocket to the top of my list. Number 11, staying in the ACC, Georgia Tech. But Georgia Tech used to be much higher on my list. Now they're 3-4, still averaging just 16.1 points per game, which is 125th. That's terrible. Allowing 26.3 points per game, which is 68th. Wins include FCS West Carolina at number 24 Pitt and Duke. Don't ask me how they got those 2 wins. I don't know, but it was hilarious that they went on the road and beat Pitt. Losses include number 4 Clemson, number 20 Ole Miss, at UCF and Virginia. Remaining schedule at Florida State, at Virginia Tech, Miami Hurricanes, number 21 North Carolina, and at number 1 Georgia. This is going to be a rough ending to a rough season for Georgia Tech. All right, now we're getting into even worse teams, my top 10, or bottom 10, if you will. Number 10, Nebraska, 3-4, averaging 29.7 points per game, which is 66, allowing 31.3 points per game, which is 108th. Their wins include FCS North Dakota, Indiana, at Rutgers. Losses include Northwestern in Ireland, Georgia Southern, number 6 Oklahoma, at Purdue. Remaining schedule, number 17 Illinois, Minnesota, at number 4 Michigan, Wisconsin, and at Iowa. Nebraska has some of the worst losses out of any of these teams. I mean, Northwestern, they're a terrible team. Georgia Southern, that's a group of 5 not so good team. And Oklahoma's on a big time down year, and they got absolutely splattered at home by Oklahoma. Nebraska, you're terrible. Number 9, jumping over to the Pac-12, we're going to start with Cal. They're 3-4, averaging 23.3 points per game, which is 101st. Allowing 22.6 points per game, which is 43rd. Wins include FCS UC Davis, UNLV, and Arizona. Losses at Notre Dame, at Washington State, at Colorado, and Washington. Remaining schedule, number 8 Oregon, at number 10 USC, at Oregon State, Stanford, number 12 UCLA. Cal is not a good team. They are a terrible team. I mean, they lost to freaking Colorado. Who loses to Colorado? But at the same time, they gave Notre Dame a run for their money on the road. I can't figure out Cal. But for now, they're a top 10 worst team in the nation. Number 8 is going to be, well, Arizona. Arizona was actually halfway decent at one point, but right now they're 3-4, averaging 31.6 points per game, which is 55th, and allowing 36.3 points per game, which is 124th. Wins at San Diego State, FCS North Dakota State, and Colorado. Losses include Mississippi State, at Cal, number 12 Oregon, and at Washington. Remaining schedule, number 10 USC, at number 14 Utah, at number 12 UCLA, Washington State, and Arizona State. I do think Arizona will pick up a couple more losses, but will it be enough to get them off my worst teams list? I don't know. It's not looking good. Number 7 on this list, back to the SEC, Vanderbilt. Man, Vanderbilt's been avoiding this list for a very long time, but they finally made it. And they're in the top 10. Now they're 3-5, averaging 26.6 points per game, which is 80th, and allowing 36.6 points per game, which is 125th. Yikes. Wins include at Hawaii, FCS Elon, and at Northern Illinois. Losses include number 23 Wake Forest, at number 2 Alabama, number 9 Ole Miss, at number 1 Georgia, and at Missouri. I guess you can say that their schedule is very responsible for how bad Vanderbilt is. I mean, that's a brutal schedule. Remaining schedule, number 25 South Carolina, at number 19 Kentucky, Florida, and number 3 Tennessee. So it doesn't get much better. Settle in, Vanderbilt. You're going to be here a while. Number 6, jumping over to the Big Ten, Indiana. They are a miserable 3-5, averaging 24.5 points per game, which is 97th, and allowing 30.6 points per game, which is 101st. Wins include Illinois somehow, some way, FCS Idaho, and Western Kentucky. That was during their 3-game winning streak to start this season. But since then, losses at Cincinnati, at Nebraska, number 4 Michigan, Maryland, and at Rutgers. Remaining schedule, number 13 Penn State, at number 2 Ohio State, at Michigan State, and Purdue. Indiana has gotten worse and worse and worse. By the time it's all said and done this year, they could be in my top 3. That's how bad they are. Kicking off my worst 5 is going to be a Pac-12 team, and that's Arizona State. They are a measly 2 2-5, averaging 25 points per game, which is 93rd, and allowing 28 points per game, which is 79th. Wins include FCS Northern Arizona, and they somehow beat number 21 Washington. Losses, are you ready? At number 11, Oklahoma State, Eastern Michigan, number 13, Utah, at number 6, USC, and at Stanford. Remaining schedule: at Colorado, number 12, UCLA, at Washington State, Oregon State, at Arizona. Arizona State may be able to pick up one more win, and that would be on the road to Colorado, but that's about it. Settle in, Arizona State. You're going to be on this list for the rest of the season. Number 4, back to the ACC. Virginia Tech. They're 2-5. They are terrible, averaging 19.1 points per game, which is 116th, and allowing 25.1 points per game, which is 63rd. Their wins include, are you ready, mighty Boston College and FCS Wofford. Long list of losses: at Old Dominion, West Virginia, who's a bad team, at North Carolina, at Pitt, and the Miami Hurricanes. Remaining schedule: at number 24, NC State, Georgia Tech, at Duke, at Liberty, and Virginia. Will Virginia Tech get another win before the end of the year? Well, maybe, but I would say one at the most. So I fully expect Virginia Tech to finish in my bottom 5 when it comes to the worst teams. Number 3, Boston College. They're also terrible, and in the ACC, they're 2-5, averaging 19.3 points per game, 0.2 of a point higher than Virginia Tech, which is 114th, but allowing 31 points per game, which is 103rd. Their 2 wins include FCS Maine, and they somehow beat Louisville. Losses include Rutgers, at Virginia Tech, at Florida State, number 5 Clemson, and at number 13 Wake Forest. Remaining schedule: at UConn, Duke, at number 24 NC State, at Notre Dame, and number 16 Syracuse. Boston College might have 1 win remaining on their schedule, and that's at UConn. The reason I don't have UConn on this list is because they're not a Power 5 team. But yes, UConn is terrible, and Boston College can finish the season 3-9. Number 2, they've been on my list the entire season. They've been at the top of my list the entire season, or bottom, however you want to word it. That's Northwestern, 1-6, averaging 18.6 points per game, which is 118th, and allowing 28.1 points per game, which is 82nd. Their only win was against Nebraska, the first game in Ireland. Blame it on the overseas traveling as why Nebraska lost that game. Losses include Duke, FCS Southern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, at number 11 Penn State, Wisconsin, at Maryland. Remaining schedule: at Iowa, number 2 Ohio State, at Minnesota, at Purdue, number 17 Illinois. I see 0 wins left on your schedule, Northwestern. You will finish 1-11. Yikes. But the number 1 team, without a doubt, still looking like they could go wire to wire as the worst team in the nation on my list, and that is Colorado. They do have 1 win though. Wow, 1-6. They're averaging 13.7 points per game, which is 129th, and allowing 38.7 points per game, which is also 129th. Their only win was against lowly Cal. Even though Cal was a 15-point favorite on the road to Colorado, Colorado pulled off a historic win over Cal. Their losses include TCU, at Air Force, at Minnesota, UCLA, at Arizona, and at Oregon State. Remaining schedule: Arizona State, number 8 Oregon, at number 10 USC, at Washington, and number 14 Utah. Colorado has 1 more opportunity for a win, and it is their next game, Arizona State at home. I predict this: if they lose to Arizona State, they will finish wire to wire the worst team in the nation on my list. If they can beat Arizona State, maybe, just maybe, they can sneak off that number 1 spot for at least 1 week. We'll see what happens. Y'all let me know in the comments section what you think about my list. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.